At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
At LinkedIn, we know hiring is a big deal for your small business. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. LinkedIn uses data that you can't find anywhere else to give you the best candidates, all so you can feel confident you're hiring the best person for the job. And even a little hiring bliss. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
Ever met a foundation that does it all? Say hi to NARS Light Reflecting Foundation. Makeup meets skincare in a bottle. It evens skin tone, blurs imperfections, and has a natural radiant finish. Plus, it's formulated with skincare ingredients to help strengthen your skin's barrier. With a newly expanded shade range of over 40 radiant shades to choose from and buildable all-day wear. NARS Light Reflecting Foundation. Find your perfect match.
Hey there! We're Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy, your book besties who take the novels you love seriously.
We embrace and respect modern fantasy, romance, and romantasy books written by women. And so it is in our nature to analyze these books as we would any other novel we might have dissected in school.
With our combined 13 years of literary academic training, we use our education to analyze and give voice to reasons you may love or hate today's popular books.
This is Jac.
And I'm Amy.
This is part 2 of this week's episode where we're discussing chapters 23 through 26 of Sarah J. Maas's debut novel, Throne of Glass.
Before we dive in, let's not forget Spilt. Spoilers, perspective, and interpretation, language, and themes.
If you'd like more information, please go back and listen to the start of part 1 of this week's episode. Now we're back for chapter 25, and this episode starts with Celaena in a dream because we just keep having her be in dreams, although this is not really a dream. Coming back to this whole foreshadowing that we've been talking about, quote, and the smell, it wasn't the smell of mildew, but of roses. You know, I just love when SJM keeps bringing it back around. Mm-hmm. And while Celaena is in the tomb, she starts to really get a bearing in seeing her surroundings. Quote, a shaft of moonlight shot through a small hole in the ceiling, falling upon the face of a beautiful marble statue lying upon a stone slab. No, not a statue, a sarcophagus. It was a tomb. There is no sunlight here. There is moonlight. And like we were saying, it's healing, it's spiritual. This is not a religious experience. This is a spiritual experience.
I love that. And, you know, it's almost like the scent of roses are like incense.
Ooh, yeah.
At a tomb.
Yeah.
Because it always wafts in when Fate, the mother, is trying to lead Celaena to the tomb.
Yep.
Now, for whatever reason, Celaena thinks that she's dreaming. As Jac said, she is not. But in this supposed dream, it is the tomb of her ancestor, Elena, the first princess of Terrasen, and her husband, Gavin, the first king of Adarlan. So we get a little bit of history here. It has always also bothered me that it's Celaena and Elena because they are so similar, and I'm sure that was intentional.
But it's a bad intentional. I don't like it.
It just doesn't work for me. It's very confusing.
It made me confused for a very long time.
Same. Anyway, Celaena has a little moment of panic when she realizes she's in this tomb. Quote, she shouldn't have entered the tomb. She shouldn't have strayed into the sacred places of the dead when she was so stained and tainted by her crimes. Something would come after her and haunt her and torture her for disturbing their peace. Now, I think this is a breadcrumb. But we see here, again, Celaena's spirituality, her superstition that informs this moment, I think it's funny because I'm like, oh yeah, Elena is definitely going to haunt you, but not in the way you think.
Yeah.
But we've talked about how Selena has kind of gone through this cleansing of her sins. And so even though she views herself as stained and tainted, she may not be in the eyes of Elena, especially when Elena later is going to tell her everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And everything about this scene in this initial moment, SJM wants us to feel as confused as Selena. And that's really hard because Selena knows more than what the reader knows.
Mm-hmm.
Selena knows that she's Aelin. Selena knows that she's related. However, we can't have Selena be obviously hiding something from us, even though we know she is. So we need to show that she's confused to make us confused.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, "It was covered in stars, raised carvings that mirrored the night sky, and the ceiling depicted the earth. Why were they reversed? She looked at the walls and put a hand to her heart. Everything here is opposite. It's not what it seems. It is confusing. It is it's her questioning things. And, we're too busy questioning her questions for us to question herself to her."
Something I realized as we were speaking earlier in the episode, when Selena looks at the stars, she feels small and insignificant.
Yeah.
But now she's in the place of stars looking at the earth, looking down at Elena.
Yeah.
Or Elena, she and Elena are technically both looking down to the earth, which I think is also supposed to symbolize like Selena, aka Aelin, have a grander purpose. Like you are not as small and insignificant as you think you are.
Yeah.
And that's what she's about to kind of uncover. Selena, despite being nervous about being there or confused, can't help but examine the face of the woman on the sarcophagus. Quote, "She was beautiful beyond reckoning. Her silver hair flowed around her youthful face like a river of moonlight." We're seeing that water connection again, water and moon connecting Selena to her ancestor, Elena. And, Jack has talked about moonlight being truth, uncovering truth and accessing truth. I also think it's about connecting Elena to her ancestors, right? When she looks at the stars, or when the moon is present, it's also about being connected to the destiny that came before her and the destiny that will come after her.
Mm-hmm. And, have to keep pointing out that moonlight. Elena's hair is coating her face like a river of moonlight.
Mm-hmm.
She is now moonlight, right? Elena is covered in moonlight herself. So we can guess that she is someone who is the embodiment of truth,
mm-hmm.
of light, of goodness. There's a moment where SJM makes a very important point. Quote, "But why was their tomb so neglected? Why had no one been to honor the dead this day? Why were there not flowers at her head? Why was Elena Galathinius Havillard forgotten?" Ooh. Not only is this a remark about how women are very often forgotten in history, we are overlooked, we are not given credit, but it's also a note about how Selena herself has been overlooked in history. She is just now a sad footnote into what had happened to Terrason. SJM, I feel like, did this scene perfectly, and we know that she did because she probably rewrote this a bunch, and everything that is said can be said in two views. You can read something as Selena, and then you can read it again as Aelin, and it works absolutely perfectly. So I'm going to read 2 points that I'm just as an example. So think of this as Selena and then Aelin. Quote, "She shouldn't have strayed into the sacred place of the dead when she was so stained and tainted by her crimes." As Selena, you'd imagine that as she's an assassin, she's stained and tainted by her crimes. As Aelin, you'd imagine it as someone who she feels like she left and abandoned her kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And then this other quote, "Damaris," she whispered, naming the blade, "you know your history." That's such a good one. That's such a good one because that is history. That is the name of the blade. And then at the same time, that's Elena telling Aelin that you know your history, as in your familial history.
That's a really good point. Good
right?
job. Yeah.
I was like, holy shit. You're saying like, oh, you know your history, like you yourself, your specific history.
Yeah. Great point.
Now I want to look into this quote. "You must listen to what I tell you. Nothing is coincidence. Everything has a purpose. You were meant to come into this castle just as you were meant to be an assassin, to learn the skills necessary for survival. I think that this is one of those things that people and authors include in books because it resonates with people. Because if our heroine, who has been through absolute shit in life, has gone through these things to get her to where she is now, then we, the readers, can have gone through the same thing. We can also feel like, wow, I went through my horrible stuff because I am here now. And that's what I've landed on type thing. Like, and I'm here because of those lessons. It's just it's a good thing. I love it when authors do that because I personally resonate with that sentiment.
Yeah, I do too. And I think if we look at Elena as the embodiment of truth, this place is a temple. This is the truth of Celaena's or Aylin's spirituality, that there are forces at work that ensured you went through these things so that you could overcome future things. And like you, Jack, I resonate with that a lot in my own personal experience. It's not something that Celaena is going to have an easy time stomaching, though. That is a really hard thing to hear when you're still in the middle of shit.
Yeah.
And it's not going to get easier. So, Celaena is having this spiritual experience, but it's not one that is necessarily on her terms. And I think that she's going to have to reckon with that throughout the rest of this book and in the future. But I still love it. And Elena continues, quote, "You were led here tonight, but not by me. I was led here too. Someone wants you to learn. Someone wants you to see." And that brings in a whole other layer of higher power, deity. Who is this entity? We're going to see the effects of this entity throughout the series. And then when that entity is no longer present, I'm really excited to uncover it. I'm really excited for what SJM has built, because I think it has repercussions for the rest of the novel and her other works. So I just have to point it out because she put her stake in the ground at the beginning.
This is also such a great example of what a traditional book is. And when we say traditional book, I mean beginning, middle, end, act 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4. You have the call to the hero's journey at the beginning. You kind of have the okay, here's the initial plot. You're a champion. You have to go through these tests. But a lot of times the greater, more intense plot will come in about midway. And this is almost exactly 50%. It's like at 48 or 46% of the book.
Yeah. Yeah. What this does is it makes it more than just a competition trope novel.
Yeah.
It gives it higher purpose and it keeps the reader intrigued, because we're going to think about this once the competition is over. What does this mean? What does it mean for the future? And we're going to want to uncover that. And I love that it's planted here.
Yes.
Rather than in the last 3 chapters of the book.
Absolutely. And by this point by the end of this chapter, this episode, you're going to have the challenge that they're going through, the secret murders, and then this, ancestral thing that's happening of watch out, there's evil, which is probably related to the killings, which we can, make that deduction. But it's a good job of by midway through the book, you have several things that are keeping you, the reader, interested. Just from a writing perspective, I always appreciate that.
Yeah, I do too.
I love the balance of this chapter because you had the end of last chapter where Celaena goes to bed with, the ring that Chaol gave her. In this moment, though, she wakes up and she has the amulet that Elena gave her, quote, "Made of intricate bands of metal, within the round border of the amulet lay 2 overlapping circles, one on top of the other. In the space that they'd shared was a small blue gem that gave the center of the amulet the appearance of an eye. A line ran straight through the entire thing. Now, while Chaol's was a sign of purity and promise, here is the sign of perseverance and promise. It's I'm watching you. You got to do your shit. I'm here to protect you, but you need to keep going." And then the fact that the chapter ends with the smell of roses again, it's that perfect mirroring, right? It's a multiple arc structure here.
Yeah. I like this point that you bring up about it being mirroring, because Chaol's promise is, "I'm watching over you to make sure you don't make bad choices."
Yeah.
Whereas Elena's is, "I'm watching over you to protect you."
Yep. I love that. I love that. Now, you might be like, hey, that was a really short chapter, especially considering it's been like an hour per chapter we've discussed things. However, there's a lot to have at the breadcrumbs and broomstick section, so stick around. Now we're going into chapter 26. The chapter starts with Selena waking up. Now, the first time Selena woke up from a nightmare, it was from her PTSD trauma. The second time she woke up, it was because she was told to save the world. The third time now confirms that she is in fact safe. However, it's more a physically aggressive way of waking up compared to the other ones, which is saying something because the other one was like she was in a tunnel. So this is where Chaol comes in and is kind of freaking out because what we do know is that there's been a murder in the palace. Quote, he put a hand on his sword as he ripped back the blankets and dragged her out of bed by the elbow. Like, just damn.
Yeah. I don't know why I put my note there. But, you're going to make a couple arguments about Chaol in this chapter, and I'm going to argue the opposite because I think that's how a lot of people don't view this kindly. They don't view Chaol kindly. And, what we're seeing is that Selena is still in bed, and if anything, she was in danger more than she caused danger to other people. But I think what we're going to see throughout the scene is Chaol cares about Selena, but he is always going to be suspicious first, empathetic second.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I like it because you could definitely read this in two different ways, and we just don't know Chaol's motives and mindset here.
Yeah.
Unlike the other two times when Selena woke up, she's a lot more sure of herself. I feel like that's what happens when a ghost tells you you have a destiny. Anyway, quote, she refused to step back as he studied her face, then her hands, then the rest of her. As he did so, she returned the favor. They're on equal footing here. Like he's looking her up and down. So it's like, bitch, I'll look you up and down at the same time too. And like I said, you can say that her ancestors have grounded her to feel that way. It put things in perspective. You know what I mean? When you have a ghost that's been staring at you to then like this random boy. Because Chaol is a dumb boy who cannot express his emotions, we get this interaction between the two. Chaol doesn't necessarily accuse Selena of having been the person to attack. However, there's no logical reason why it would be Selena because of how the body was found. So you get this quote. And I suppose you think I did it? I hope you didn't, as the body was half eaten. Eaten? She crinkled her nose. Like, I see what you're saying where like Chaol cannot trust Selena. And I agree. Like, I don't argue that at all. I think there's a lot of complicated emotions within him. And I think both of our things are kind of, can be working in tandem. But there's also this element of like, well, of course she didn't eat this guy. Like, of course that's like, she didn't do it. But I know. So in my perspective, I'm like, I think he's also partly trying to see if she's safe.
Yeah. And I don't deny that. And I don't deny that Chaol is a little bit messed up in the head and needs to go to a lot of therapy to figure out what his priorities are. I do think he wants to make sure she's safe. But I also know that he can't deny the fact that just yesterday, she said to him, I celebrate in my own way.
Yep.
And she mentioned something about giving sacrifices. Like, this is when we see the body and we see how ritualistic it comes across, the act of the killing. Chaol is doing the right thing and doing his due diligence by making sure it wasn't Selena.
Yep.
However, it doesn't deny the fact that he keeps asking her, even after she has denied it, like, where were you last night? Where were you last night? And she's like, I was here. You locked me up in here. So no matter how much he wants her to be safe, he also doesn't trust her. And that, I think, is ultimately why readers struggle with Chaol, because they're like, you should just trust her. Why are you being a dick?
But like, he can't trust her completely.
No, he can't. He can't. And I'm not saying he
No, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to them.
Got it.
Okay. The them of the outside.
Let's also take a moment to dig a little into what Chaol just said, quote, I'm hoping you didn't kill the champion as the body was half eaten. This is an illuminating moment because no matter the champion, they are being consumed in some manner by whatever evil is in the castle. Their innards are being taken out, their brain is being taken out, and they're not there. We are being reminded of human weakness. And all these humans that have died are supposed to be capable in some manner, whether they're assassin or from the army, etc. So, therefore, by being killed and half eaten, whatever is hunting down the champions, it has greater power than them. We should be afraid for Celaena, and Celaena should be afraid for herself when she knows that she's not at her 100% strength level or capacity. But Celaena writes this off just as much as Dorian and Chaol do. When she thinks about the killer, she thinks, quote, some vermin probably got to the body before it was found. Very, very hungry vermin. Now, she's trying to comfort herself. I understand that when she's being dismissive. However, this is the opposite of what I was just saying. She's crediting vermin, like mice and rats, with more power than humans. No. No, Celaena. But she needs that reassurance so that she can go about her day, because there's nothing she can do about whatever evil exists.
Maybe she thinks that they're ROUS's, rodents of unusual size. That is a Princess Bride reference.
I haven't watched Princess Bride in a long time.
I love it so much.
Yeah.
Celaena then heads back to the tomb after Chaol's like, you'll be happy to know you don't get to work. You don't have to do anything today. She's like, great, I'm going to bed. And then the second he walks away, she's like, psych. And then the only thing left she could have done is like put pillows underneath the blankets to be like, he'll never know that I'm not here. So she goes back to the tomb, and we get a clue as to why she won't find anything there. Quote, in the daytime, a ray of sunlight shone into the tomb, making all of the dust motes she stirred up swirl like falling snow. There's sunlight here. And like we were saying, moonlight is what's going to illuminate the truth. This is just highlighting what is cold, snow falling and everything. Also, just kind of, I feel like this is, whether this was done on purpose or not, it reminds me of red shoes, like winter berries poking out in the snow. And here is another moment of out in the sun with snow. Mm-hmm. Even while Celaena is trying to figure out what's going on, she still has a sense of humor. Celaena wrapped a finger on the queen's pert nose. And now she's like, so like she's leaning on the sarcophagus. Mm-hmm. One would think you'd have better things to do with your afterlife, she thought with a tired grin. Her voice came out quieter than she would have liked. Even with her humor back and her trying to like work through things, it's still not entirely working because she's experiencing self-doubt. There's a certain level of imposter syndrome, which is an interesting thing. You know that, God, what's her name? Iona? She's the rugby player that's super popular, really famous female.
I don't remember her name, but I know who you're talking about.
They did
U.S. team?
Yeah. There was an interview with her recently, and they asked her, how does it feel like, how does it feel like to have gone, like to have this level of success? Like, how are you dealing with imposter syndrome? And her response is, I don't have imposter syndrome. I've worked really hard to get here. And then it's this like idea of women, oftentimes, I felt it a million times of feeling imposter syndrome. We should have this more like, I don't have imposter syndrome. I worked my ass to get here.
Yeah.
That's just a side note. But in this moment, I think she does have imposter syndrome where she was like, me? You want me to do this? All right. And that's why we get the sense of false bravado coming back, because it's easier for her to have that sense of fake bravado, right? Quote, not that the thought of something wicked dwelling in this castle scared her or anything. No, it wasn't that at all. She's scared, but she won't admit it, understandably.
It honestly sounds like something you would say.
All right. Yes, that's true. It is, in fact, true. What happens when Celaena was walking around the day before in an old dress and is questioning her self-worth and is questioning her ability of saving everyone? What, like the day before, she's, going through, like, she just wasn't herself at her maximum ability. So what does she do? She finds and takes control of her looks. And she looks really, really good. We can attest to that because, quote, she smiled at the young Chevaliers. Okay. She smiled at the young.
Technically, it's Chevalier.
Chevaliers. Okay. She smiled at.
I'm just trying to think of what people will be less mad about us saying.
Let me just look at the pronunciation. Chevaliers.
Yeah,
okay.
Chevalier.
She smiled at the young chevaliers they passed and smirked at the court women who eyed her pink and white gown. She couldn't blame them. The dress was spectacular, and she was spectacular in it. Even Ress, one of the handsomer guards posted outside her rooms, had said so. Naturally, it hadn't been too difficult to convince him to escort her to the library. Like, she knows what she's doing. She's back in full force. And she also knows what she's doing by wearing a pink and white gown. It's very innocent, very sweet and girlish. And she's taking back control with her fashion and using her appearance as a weapon. All the while looking like innocence and purity with her purity ring. So I will forever call it.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And there is power in this disguise, right? There's a murder on the loose. Kale has questioned her about where she was all night and has basically accused her of being a suspect. So by highlighting her innocence, not only is she able to manipulate the guards into helping her get more information, it helps everyone else also continue to associate her with innocence, and therefore she can't be the killer, which honestly, brilliant. It's a great
100
plan.
Chef's kiss. That's the level of manipulation that we approve of. There's like a thing I saw where it's like millennials just keep making Harry Potter references because that's just like all we are.
Yeah. That was our entire lives.
That being said, she's a Slytherin, not a Gryffindor.
I never suggested otherwise.
In stark contrast of what Selena looks like is the reality of what's around them, which is the death of the champion. Quote, Xavier's chest cavity had been split open and his vital organs removed. Unless someone had moved them upon finding the body, there was no trace of them, and his long face, stripped of its flesh, was still contorted in a silent scream. I don't think I appreciate, like, actually visualize, like, so it's just muscle?
Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah. So let's continue that quote. This was no accidental killing. There was a hole in the crown of Xavier's head, and she could see that his brain was gone too. The smears of blood on the wall looked like someone had been writing and then rubbed it away. But even now, some of the writing remained, and she tried not to gape at it. Word marks, 3 word marks forming an arcing line that had to have once been a circle near the body. Strong witchcraft vibes, very serial killer. It immediately made me think of the Night Stalker.
I was gonna say the Night Stalker too.
If you haven't watched the Netflix documentary and you like true crime, you absolutely must. It is so good. But it like gives me the heebie-jeebies. SJM.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah, it's very terrifying. And I think that it's also, you know, you have this like, here she is with pure innocence and she's looking at this like horrible scene. But rather than being horrified of what she's necessarily looking at, she has a different interpretation of the moment, we'll say. Quote, fool. If she wanted to knock off her competitors one by one, she'd do it quick and clean. A slit throat, a knife in the heart, a poisoned glass of wine. This was just plain tasteless. Like, she's criticizing the way that it's the way that they're being killed. And remember, there is pride to her work. Death is art, and she takes lives, but she does it with a level of grace and art to her work. And I think it also could be like, what the hell, Kale? You think I'm capable of this?
Yeah.
Like, I'm much classier of a murder.
Yeah. And this goes back to a conversation we had when they first started training together. Selena knows and is being reminded that Kale doesn't appreciate the craft of an assassin. And I'm going to use air quotes, she quote unquote takes pride in her craft because she has to justify to herself what she's done. She doesn't appreciate what the murder's done because it's senseless. It's basically torture. And she's allowed to poo-poo it because it's not something she's guilty of doing herself. And so she's not horrified because for the first time in a while, she's able to be like, ugh, that's disgusting. That's tacky. That's unacceptable. As if these more humane ways, quote unquote, humane ways of killing with slicing the throat, poison, those things are less involved.
Yeah.
Less that.
It's not torture.
It's not torture the way that this is. I don't know why I was really on something last night because my note says also, no matter what Kale feels towards Selena, he's always mistrust forward. Logic is not available to him when he is in protector mode. Honestly, I'm not surprised Selena isn't more offended. Like, she should be extremely offended that this torture, this way of killing is misappropriated onto her.
Yeah. I agree. She should be insulted of like, you really think that I would be capable of doing this?
Yeah.
This gruesome murder?
And that's, I think, ultimately why at the end of the day, Cale and Selena are not going to work, because he is capable of thinking of the worst, but beyond the worst of people.
I also feel like what we're seeing is a murder. She's not a murderer. Yeah. She's an assassin. And that's why they keep calling her an assassin, because even though she's killed someone, it's not the same. So, there's a difference there.
Yeah, I think so too. At the end of the scene, Selena ultimately ends with empathy for the dead champion, something we saw happen in last week's episode for the other champions who are killed. Quote, she should thank whatever grim god had decided to end Xavier's life, but for some reason, she couldn't. At the end of the day, Selena is an assassin, but she also understands the value of life. She doesn't take death lightly. She doesn't, I'm not going to say that she enjoys the act of killing, because she's had to inflict a lot of death in order to survive over the last decade. So she knows the difference between life and death. And that's why at the end of the day, even though Xavier was competition, she can't be happy that he was killed.
But at the same time, she is thanking whatever grim god did kill him. Like, that's...
She should thank.
She should thank whatever. Yeah.
But for some reason, she couldn't.
Oh, okay.
She doesn't.
Gotcha. Yeah, never mind. We'll be right back.
Your hair is so much more than what you see when you look in the mirror. And that's why as I get older, I worry about stress, nutrition, hormones, and my lifestyle and what those effects will have on my hair and my body overall. That's why I've started taking Nutrafol's science-backed whole body approach program, which nourishes growth from within to achieve my best hair.
Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand trusted by over 1.5 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol.
While many supplements rely solely on ingredient studies, Nutrafol clinically tests final formulations to ensure their efficacy. In a clinical study, 86% of women reported improved hair growth after taking Nutrafol Women Hair Growth Supplement for 6 months.
Everyone's root cause of hair thinning are different, so one-size-fits-all approach to hair growth doesn't cut it. Nutrafol has multiple formulas that are tailored to give your hair what it needs to grow throughout different stages, such as postpartum and menopause, as well as for different lifestyles such as plant-based diets.
So start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code BOOKTALK. That's BOOKTALK.
Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, that's spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code BOOKTALK.
That's Nutrafol.com, promo code BOOKTALK, BOOKTALK.
My new focus in life and in my wardrobe is quiet luxury. The things that are nice, that make me feel good, but I know are worth the money that I spent on it without being boisterous.
I've definitely noticed that I've been spending more time on elevating what I'm purchasing, and some of my favorite go-to items have been from Quince. That's because they offer a range of high-quality items, but with prices that are within reach and very reasonable.
They have 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50 and washable silk tops and dresses that I love to wear to work.
Quince items are usually priced between 50 to 80% less than other similar brands.
They work with top factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes and cut out the middleman in the process.
One of my all-time favorite cardigans is actually from Quince, and every time I wear it, I always get compliments of how cozy and how soft it is.
My favorite Quince item is this button-up washable silk blouse that I wear to work, and what I love about it is it's so versatile. I can pair it with a cardigan. I can wear it on its own. I can wear it with a blazer, and it always makes me feel good about myself.
Give yourself the luxury gift you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns.
That's QUINCE.com/booktalk to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK. As most of our listeners know, I'm getting married, and let me tell you, getting married is expensive.
Let me tell you, being a guest to your wedding is expensive, and that's where Acorns come in.
Acorns is a financial wellness app that makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future, and in my case, my wedding.
You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that matches you to your money goals.
You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you get started with the spare money you've got right now, even if all you've got is spare change.
Money planning stresses me out quite a bit, and Acorns makes it so easy.
It only takes 5 minutes to create an account with Acorns and start investing. It gives you small, simple steps to get you and your money on track, which is sometimes just the hardest part.
I love it because no matter what age you are, it's always important to be able to take control of your money and your investments.
So sign up now and join the over 13 million all-time customers who've already saved and invested over $22 billion with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/booktalk, that's BOOKTALK, or download the Acorns app to get started. Paid client endorsement compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK.
You're the perfect blend of elegance and style, and your ride should be no different. The 2024 Hyundai Sonata Hybrid meets all your needs, from business to brunch and everywhere in between. With head-turning details like a sleek front end, plus stylish interior, and an available 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster and seamless tech integration. Okay, Hyundai. Visit HyundaiUSA.com to learn more about the new 2024 Hyundai Sonata Hybrid.
We're now in Dorian's POV, and the boys are fighting. They're being a little snippy. And the best part of I feel like some of SJM's best writing has been in these middle chapters. Like, I think she's really found her stride as an author here, because one of my favorite parts in this section is that the actions work for what they're actually arguing about. The actions and the emotions of the conversation are playing out. So Dorian is not ready for this fight/conversation. Quote, his muscles were sore from weeks of not practicing. His breath was ragged in his throat as he thrust and thrust again. So he is physically not ready to talk about this, right? His breath is stuck in his throat. His words are stuck in his throat. You can think about it. And he's out of practice when it comes to his emotions and out of practice when it comes to women, aka Selena. Just as Kale was too physically hard on Selena, he's just as physically hard with Dorian. He is not holding back. He is fighting there. This is me waving a sword. This is sword fighting. Of course, this discussion would only happen, though, with controlled violence, because God forbid they actually share their emotions without sharp weapons.
Right. That's never going to happen. Kale mocks Dorian through all of this also, which is not good. Quote, this is what comes from such idle behavior, Kale chuckled, stepping to the side so that Dorian stumbled forward. He remembered a time when they'd been of equal skill, that had been long ago. Dorian, while he still enjoyed swordplay, had grown to prefer books. Now, what if we take the symbolic nature of this conversation, what we're really getting at is the emotional the capacity for emotional intimacy, right? Dorian, being in court, being under the thumb of his father and his mother, is unable to engage in meaningful conversation or relationships with people around him other than Kale. Kale's the opposite, right? He has relationships with his guards. He's able to form a new relationship with Selena. And Dorian's getting his ass whooped. Yeah. He is a soft boy. And Kale's mocking him right now, but unfortunately it's true, and Dorian will be ripped apart and rebuilt anew because of his inability to really connect with people. And yeah, I'll let you continue because this goes on throughout the entire scene.
I really like this scene, and kind of coming back to what I was saying about how the actions of the fight mimic their conversation. Quote, "At least one of you has some common sense." Kale delivered each blow with such precision that Dorian had to admire him, "because you've clearly lost your mind." Again, each blow, they're talking about sword fighting, but what he's saying is also a blow to Dorian.
Mm-hmm.
Then Dorian says, "And what about you?" Dorian demanded. "Do you want me to comment on how you showed up in her rooms last night, the same night another champion died?" Dorian fainted, but Kale didn't fall for it. Now, again, the physical actions are he fainted and he didn't fall for it sword-wise, but he also fainted by trying to provoke him, but Kale doesn't fall for the provocation.
Yeah.
He doesn't take the bait.
It's so good. It's
so good.
And I think, I don't know if it's clear or if you said it in your notes, Jack, but it's clear that even though they're sparring in a practicing sort of way, they're really verbally and physically sparring over Selena.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's what...
Is that your note at the end?
No, I was like, I thought that I already said that, where it's like they're talking... It's implied they're talking about Selena, but it's like they're physically fighting and they're verbally fighting at the same time. It's matching.
I'm sorry, I missed my brain.
I was like, that's what I've been talking about for minutes.
No, I just couldn't remember if you explicitly stated Selena.
Well, I mean, okay, so I may not have explicitly said, but this is about Selena. They are talking about her.
And if you said it, just cut out what I said.
Well, and if I didn't, I'll keep the whole thing
okay.
of this. I'm like, they know it's about Selena. Dorian knows that Kale is there for him. However, even though they're talking, they're fighting over a girl here, Dorian knows that Kale is there for him, being a friend first. Quote, "Taking the time to spar with him when there was a fresh corpse in the castle was a sacrifice Dorian was surprised Kale had been willing to make. Dorian knew how much his position meant to him." As I'm about to say something, I'm already like fighting it in my head. So at first I was like, wow, this is important to show that the Kale is willing to show that he puts the people he loves first, right? To talk to Dorian, to be there for him. At first I was like, yeah, like Kale is just trying to, be there as a good friend. And now I'm like, no, Kale is taking time out of his day to go and just tell his friend, like, back the fuck up. Do not mess with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, so that kind of changes some. Either way, Kale's willing to put his issues aside for something.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting point because we saw how Kale was villainizing Dorian in the previous chapter of like, doesn't Dorian know she's a virgin, right?
Yeah.
Accusing him of being a fuckboy. Here, Dorian is doing the opposite. He's like, wow, I'm really grateful that my friend is taking the time to spend time with me.
Yeah.
And so we see how much more interested and territorial maybe Kale is over Selena than Dorian is. But also, again, even with people he truly loves, Kale will think the worst of people around him first before he is capable of thinking of the good.
Yeah.
Which
is
Dorian,
one of his downfalls.
It is. And that's and it's important that we see that Dorian is not exempt from that.
Yeah. Equal opportunity.
Yeah.
In contrast to Kale being a good friend, Dorian can't not think about himself. However, I was about to say, like, I'm changing my note. Maybe Kale isn't being a good friend. He's there to scold him. However, Dorian also cannot not think about himself. Quote, "There was something so defeated, so bitter, underlining the captain's words that Dorian, for a heartbeat, felt badly. He should stay away from Selena. Kale had enough to worry about." But then he thought about the list his mother made and he realized he'd had enough too. Dude, like, what the fuck? Like, that's, as much as Kale sucks for, not expecting the best out of his friends, out of everyone.
Yeah.
Of course, he's not wrong. That's the thing, where his best friend, he's not expecting the best out of Dorian, but Dorian is literally saying, oh, my mommy wants me to date a woman or marry a woman from this list. I'm going to go hit on this girl that my friend likes. And then, to Kale's point, Selena is an assassin who's doing things behind his back. So even though it's one of Kale's downfalls, he's also not wrong.
Correct. it's just not a great situation. And also, they're 18, 19, and 22. So
no,
they're all going to be a little immature.
They're all 20 years older. Because as I said, I couldn't handle 10 years wasn't enough.
Maybe 15.
15 years.
So right before the quote that Jack read, there's this moment where Dorian and Cale talk about the guards at Selena's door. Quote, Dorian's blood went a bit cold. You think they'll try to kill Selena? Cale, I added some extra guards around her rooms. Dorian, to protect her or to keep her in? They stopped at the hallway crossroads where they would part ways to their separate rooms. What difference does it make? Cale said quietly. You don't seem to care either way. You'll visit her no matter what I say, and the guards won't stop you because you're the prince.
Some anger here.
Yeah.
Resentment.
Now, Dorian's calling Cale out for kind of that mistrust of Selena, because that's how Dorian is seeing it right now. Like, no matter how much Dorian might think Cale likes Selena, he also sees Cale being an asshole sometimes too. Again, not that it's not earned. Selena is sneaking around. However, Cale's bitterness comes across as jealousy. Cale knows he doesn't stand a chance against Dorian's looks and status. It's this interesting dynamic because ultimately Selena has more feelings for Cale than she does for Dorian. And the superficialness of Dorian is what maybe steals the attention, but that's not long lasting, as we know, having read this book. I find it very interesting because in this is where Dorian finds power. And it's the only place he has power, because even though he's lost the conversation, he's lost the sparring, he isn't he doesn't have power with his mom or dad. Ultimately, at least he's got his looks to get what he wants.
You know, whether we said it in a past episode or earlier this episode, time and space does not exist here. Cale, we talked about before that Cale has probably been passed up by women all the time for Dorian. I mean, black hair, blue eyes, good looking, doomed. Yeah. My entire 20s was lost to that. And there's something about guys who have black hair and blue eyes that know they're the biggest fuckboys. Like, they know they're a catch, regardless of how ugly they may actually be. And then you add the fact that Dorian's hot, you're screwed. And a prince, you're screwed. So yeah. Cale can't even begin to fathom the idea that maybe Selena would be interested in him. And it's an automatic, well, of course she would be interested in Dorian. Before he can even entertain that, how can he block Dorian?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The chapter ends with Dorian alone in his tower. Quote, he had the entire tower to himself, though his chambers occupied only the upper level. They provided a haven from everyone, but today they just felt empty. I think this is a great symbol of Dorian's life and his associations that we were talking about earlier in the scene. Dorian has so much privilege, but it is as hollow as the tower is literally hollow. Like, you have this entire tower and you only take up the upper level. Yeah. And it's a great visual representation of how isolated and alone Dorian is. And what this is doing is it's allowing this sparring, it's allowing this conversation to really highlight just how lonely Dorian is. And he's becoming more and more cognizant of that loneliness. And so it's not just rebellion, it's feeling empty, feeling disconnected that drives him towards Selena.
Yeah, yeah. Listener, if you can hear things in the background, it's for the first time this year raining in LA.
Thank God.
Thank God. All right, let's get into some breadcrumbs and broomsticks. In chapter 23, when Selena wakes up from her nightmare, she notices that, quote, her windows were shut, an odd draft from somewhere in her room kissed her face, smelling strangely of roses. We talked about this throughout the episode. However, just want to reiterate that roses was a huge breadcrumb.
And the draft foreshadows the secret passageways.
Yep.
Still in chapter 23, when Selena is reminded that it is Sam Hewen, she asks Cale, quote, and will you be summoning the dead to you this haunted night or lighting a bonfire with your companions? Cale responds, I don't partake in such superstitious nonsense. Selena, be careful, my cynical friend. The gods and the dead are closest to the earth this day. They can hear every nasty comment you make, which is why she talks to Elena tonight.
Yeah. Still in chapter 23, when Cale asks Selena what she's going to do during Sam Hewen, Selena tells him, quote, I worship in my own ways. Perhaps I'll make a sacrifice or two of my own. This is hinting at a heritage that's different from his own because she's Fae.
After attending church on Sam Hewen, Dorian runs into Selena. Quote, Dorian turned around a hedge, almost crashing into a figure of blue-green velvet. It was the same color of the mountain lake. That gem-like shade that didn't quite have a name, not to mention the dress was about 100 years out of fashion, which is appropriate for someone about to speak to the dead.
Then finally, in chapter 23, quote, but kneeling before it was Cain. His head bent. He focused on something on the ground. At the sound of their footsteps, Cain's head shot up. He grinned broadly and stood. His hands were covered in dirt. Selena looked at the spot where Cain had just been kneeling. He dug out the dirt packed into the hollows of the strange mark in the flagstone, making the mark clearer.
I forgot to add a note to that one.
I mean, that's because Cain is one of the, he's the one who's doing all the things. He's possessed.
Yeah.
He's digging.
So in chapter 24, when Selena is in the tomb, she realizes that the sarcophagi are for her ancestors. Quote, then this man was Gavin, the first king of Adarlan, and this was Elena, the first princess of Terrasen, Brannon's daughter, and Gavin's wife and queen.
So Brannon, we all know, is her ancestor. We also know Brannon ends up being Lydia's ancestor in Crescent City. So I have to always take a beat to be like, okay, who is who? What is what's going on here? So Brannon ends up going to, his daughter goes over to Adarlan. Mm-hmm. So just keep that in check. Then some more lore in chapter 24, quote, she knew that sword. She'd stepped towards the treasure. It was the legendary sword of Gavin, the sword that had wielded in a fierce war that had almost ripped apart the continent, the sword that had slain the Dark Lord Erewhon.
Yeah. That's a lot of information we need to remember.
Yeah, it's important stuff. It just ends up being so confusing later on. It's so much good information is given here, but we're just flagging it, remembering it. We'll come back. This is plot.
Yeah. Again, still in chapter 24, while Selena is talking to Elena, quote, the nausea returned. She hoped Elena wouldn't speak of what her heart refused to remember, hoped that the queen wouldn't mention what she had spent so long forgetting. SJM is shoving Selena's true identity down our throats.
Yeah.
Jack left a note.
So we don't plan who reads what.
Yeah.
On which one does breadcrumbs. We'll just shove, put something there, and then whoever reads it, the quote is, I'll read it.
Yeah. This is your note.
It says, deep throat me with your breadcrumbs. But it feels obvious. It's so funny because I'm sure as a writer, she probably was writing this thinking, is this too obvious? Mm-hmm. Is everyone to just know? Shoving it down their throats.
Yeah. I mean, we know something's going on, right? But we can't fathom what it might be.
Exactly. In chapter 25, in her dream, Selena sees a door with a, quote, a bronze knocker in the form of a skull in its center. It seemed to be smiling. Mort! We're about to get some Mort!
Still in chapter 25, when Selena enters Elena's tomb, she notices that the floor, quote, was covered in stars, raised carvings that mirrored the night sky, and the ceiling depicted the earth. Why were they reversed? Does this perhaps foreshadow the end of Kingdom of Ash?
Potentially. Finally, in chapter 26, when Dorian and Cale talk about the king, quote, no, I haven't the slightest idea. I remember him leaving like this when we were children, but it hasn't happened for some years now. I bet he's doing something particularly nasty. The last time he left, he got infected with the Valg, and yes, he is doing something particularly nasty.
All right. So we did not solicit listener thoughts for this episode, so we're going to jump to the question of the week, which is, we are now at the halfway point of the book, so let's talk about character development for our three main characters, Selena, Cale, and Dorian. But before we do, Jack wants to read something.
A listener actually sent this when Amy was reading Throne of Glass. This was her note from 2023. Three.
Yeah.
Day 1 of Throne of Glass. Got halfway through chapter 13. Hot take. Dorian is a prototype for For Reese and Selena is a more realistic 18-year-old than Farah in terms of maturity and funnier. So I
remember writing that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of note that because, we're halfway through, and I think that I said something in the middle of this episode about how SJM is making a very classic book and, beginning, middle, end. So we're in the middle. And when we think about character development, I think we're seeing some very good character development. When we met Selena, she was so cocky of herself, it was annoying. However, it was hiding a bunch of trauma. Now here she is, still with the trauma, working through that trauma, and she's cocky with herself, but it's not as aggressive as it was before. That's because she's healing and she's working through some things. Then you have Kale, who did not trust Selena at all to begin with, and I think Selena is making him question quite a bit of his own, everything, his own, what he believes in. And then Dorian, I argue, the first bit of development we're seeing was this episode, thank God, which makes sense because we're halfway through and we're seeing him actually use his brain a little bit. So that is my, we're getting that, everyone's done that one step forward development.
Yeah. And I don't, when we think about character development, especially when it comes to series and characters we're going to spend a lot of time with, there's character development in the book sense, and then there's character development in the series sense, right? And sometimes there's going to be slower movement in the book than there will be from a series perspective. And so I do think, to Jac's point, as readers, I think what's happening is we're uncovering the layers of Selena, and we're also uncovering the complexity she's capable of, which is, I should hate these men. They represent everything that has done wrong to me in my life. But I also recognize that they're humans and they're separate from that. And I think that's a complex place to be at the age of 18 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was going to make a comparison to a different series, but I will not. I'm going to keep it thrown a glass. Again, to the points we've made before, it makes sense that we've seen a shift in Selena's confidence, that we're starting to see her recognize reality for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited to see how she deals with this idea of, fate has something bigger planned for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy you brought up the idea of series character development versus book, because I think when we think Throne of Glass, we immediately assume the book, and we think about the last 2 books, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where everyone's mind goes, are the last ones. And it's it was heartbreaking and everything wonderful happened. And there's so many more characters and other magical things that are happening that it's hard not to come back to the very beginning, to just a single book, and say, what did SJM do with this one book? And it's a well-structured book so far. It's doing what it needs to do. We're getting the layers, we're getting the growth. And, it's just kind of pulling people back to the beginning, to the simplicity when it was just these 3 people, and what that means and what it's doing, and how what we're seeing here will impact everything. But yeah, it's good to have the exercise of what are we doing? That is a one book analysis.
Right. And I think that's important because we were at a book event recently and someone was like, I'm reading Throne of Glass and I'm in Heir of Fire and I just can't do it. I just can't finish the series. I'm going to DNF. Yeah. And we're like, everyone's response, and you said this to me when I started the series as well, just get through the first 3 books, it gets better. And that's what people say about ACOTAR. Just get through the first book, it gets better in the second book. And I think people really sleep on the amount of intricate, very minute detail work SJM does with her characters in her first few books. And I think we're seeing that here. I think there's a lot more layers in this book than you and I even realized before we started analyzing it, because I did not expect to be recording for 3 to 4 hours every episode. There is so much meat in these books for us to dissect, and the movements are small, but they are necessary in order to build the foundation for the rest of the series. You couldn't take these characters and throw them into Empire Storms and expect them to be capable of the same thing.
It's so funny because it's like we were talking about these movements are small and minute, but at the same time we taught, like when we before we even started recording, I felt like, oh, everything is so overt and in your face and it feels like a young author and you can tell this was written when she was 16. And now here I am thinking, you know what? I'm taking back my words. Now, it still reads like a young author. I still think ACOTAR is one of her best written books. You can tell she's written a lot by that point and she's learned. And there's the things that she has here, you can tell that she's learned and developed elsewhere. That being said, for a new author, this is a really good book.
Yeah. For a debut novel.
Yeah.
There is so much in here that you don't necessarily expect from a debut novel.
And it's okay if things are over. It doesn't have to be a Crescent City level complicated. It's okay that things are a little bit more simple. It's a lot to sink our teeth into, and I applaud her. And so I'm happy we did the halfway check. I can't believe we're halfway through.
I know.
We're halfway done.
We are halfway done. And episode 1 airs in 2 days.
Oh my God. This is exciting. So yeah, when we're recording this, it's still January.
You guys, January 2025 has been the longest January of all Januaries.
So the longest year this month. It has been, yeah. I'm not saying anything about where it's going to be in the future when this comes out. I'm not jinxing shit. I learned not to. But yeah, I'm happy. Hopefully we've gained some new followers this season. Hopefully we've sparked people's interest. If there's anything, you guys liked, tell us, because we're just talking into the void. No one knows what we've mentioned.
We need positive affirmation.
But genuinely though, because at this point we've gone 5 episodes going into the dark, speaking into nothingness, and just hoping for the best. You and I
have the first season.
Yeah, and so I'm like, I hope people like it. Now, for episode 6, we'll have an idea of what people think, which will either hurt us or help us.
Yeah, that's very true.
Words of affirmation is our thing. So, yeah. Let's sign off.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy. Next week, we will be exploring chapters 27 through 31 of Throne of Glass.
We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. We would also love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You could submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a future mini episode or a Patreon exclusive episode.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon or Venmo. You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at the handle Book Talk for Book Talk. Bye.
All right, did you stop recording?
No. Okay.
That was only 3 hours. Is there thunder outside or is that?
I don't think so.
Okay. It's either a truck or thunder. I think that is thunder.
Yeah, I hear it too.
That's funny.
Out my window.
Yeah, yeah. Before we do, Nicole sent us a text saying it's hailing outside.
Oh my God.
I'm supposed to go to Disneyland.
I think you guys might need to not go. My new focus in life and in my wardrobe is quiet luxury. The things that are nice, that make me feel good, but I know are worth the money that I spent on it without being boisterous.
I've definitely noticed that I've been spending more time on elevating what I'm purchasing, and some of my favorite go-to items have been from Quince. That's because they offer a range of high-quality items, but with prices that are within reach and very reasonable.
They have 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50 and washable silk tops and dresses that I love to wear to work.
Quince items are usually priced between 50 to 80% less than other similar brands.
They work with top factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes and cut out the middleman in the process.
One of my all-time favorite cardigans is actually from Quince, and every time I wear it, I always get compliments of how cozy and how soft it is.
My favorite Quince item is this button-up washable silk blouse that I wear to work, and what I love about it is it's so versatile. I can pair it with a cardigan. I can wear it on its own. I can wear it with a blazer. And it always makes me feel good about myself.
Give yourself the luxury gift you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns.
That's QUINCE.com/booktalk to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK.
The search for truth never ends. Introducing June's Journey, a hidden object mobile game with a captivating story. Connect with friends, explore the Roaring 20s, and enjoy thrilling activities and challenges while supporting environmental causes. After 7 years, the adventure continues with our immersive travels feature. Explore distant cultures and engage in exciting experiences. There's always something new to discover. Are you ready? Download June's Journey now on Android or iOS.